How often do you think about the things that you can't do? I don't mean like illegal, like I'd like to rob a bank, but I mean like things that you would like to be able to do, but that you are unable to do. And it could be a list. I don't know how often you think about it, but for example, I could not be a doctor. I think the patients would get really tired of me saying, "Ooh, gross," or "That's disgusting," or "I can't look." Like, I wouldn't be able to do it. I'd pass out in the ER, and it just wouldn't be. They would have to tend to me. I couldn't do it. It's just not something I could do. Run a marathon? Some of these things are, as you get older, the list grows. You're like, when you're like 18, 19, 20, you're like, someday I will run a marathon. And then you get to be my age, and you're like, I don't know. I don't think that's happening. And then you read an inspirational story of about an 80-year-old that ran a marathon. You still think, maybe it could happen. There's lots of things. There's just lots of things that we add to this list of I can't do. And maybe you've even built a bit of an identity around that list. That this is the list that you think about. These are all the things that you will never get to do or you'll never get to experience. And part of your being happy is sort of coming to terms mentally with those kinds of things. But you've also probably experienced this, that the concept of can't is a bit of a catch-all. It's something that gets buried sort of in our psyche, and there's some things we cannot do. That's just true. There's some things that it's a can't, and that's just the way it is. I can't be an NBA player. That was something I wanted to do when I was a kid before I realized that you needed skill and height and athleticism. But at some point, wouldn't it be the greatest feel-good story ever? 48-year-old suburban dad shooting baskets in the driveway. NBA scout comes along and says, "You Wolves now." I'd be like, that would be an amazing movie. Even if I never got to play, they would write books about it. You would be like, "Who's Rudy?" That Patrick Doherty story would be the most amazing thing. But can't is also code for sometimes for I don't want to. You've been there too. There's a couple that I know that when the wife asks the husband, "Can you do this thing?" the husband will say, "That's impossible." And the wife will say, "Is it impossible, or do you not want to do it?" Can't is sometimes code for I don't want to. Can't is sometimes code for I don't believe that I could. Maybe you could do it, but I don't believe that I could, and that's just as good as not being able to do it. And can't is sometimes this thing where somebody told me that I couldn't, and I just never thought that was in me, or that I had that ability, or I never had the encouragement or the support. Now, I'm not trying to give you a motivational speech here. There are faith expectations that feel insurmountable. Things that God has asked you to do that you've said, "Sorry, I can't." I was talking to a member about a coworker of theirs with whom they've had conversations about church. And this coworker there's something about church, there's something about Christianity, they've had a bad experience or something along the way. And this coworker gets agitated when the conversation of Christianity, faith, church comes up. And their response is, "I can't keep all the rules that Christians are supposed to keep." All right, well, it's not about rules, but I hear what you're saying. And this coworker goes on to say, in fact, it's obvious that Christians can't even keep all the rules that Christians are supposed to keep. And I understand that. If that's your view, it's very logical to point out that if you think Christianity is all about rules and expectations, and you're looking around at the Christian world, and you're like, "Well, yeah, they're not doing a very good job of it." And you're like, "I couldn't do that either." We're in a series about spiritual cognitive distortions, and the series we've titled, "Did God Really Say That?" Did God really say that? And this goes back all the way to the garden. Here's a picture, some fine art. It's called Expulsion from the Garden by Thomas Cole. But the question of did God really say that goes back to this moment, this interaction in the garden when the serpent places a cognitive distortion whispers one into Eve's ear. Did God really say that you're not supposed to eat of any of the trees? It wasn't true, but it was a distorted truth that seemed to get into their psyche and their thinking and encourage them to make bad choices. We might define spiritual cognitive distortions like this. They're half-truths and disinformation, and they create wrong patterns of thinking in our mind, and they make us feel stuck. They make us feel hopeless and helpless, like we can't do anything, that we can't get anywhere. I have a theory that our American culture feeds this particular distortion in a unique way. Our American culture. I don't know if this is true worldwide, and maybe it is. I haven't been everywhere, but I think this is true for Americans. So if you're living in the good old US of A, this is probably something that you've wrestled with. There is a lot of pressure to be a functioning human in the United States. You're like, well, there should be a lot of pressure to be a functioning human anywhere. That's just a good thing. You should be a functioning human. Let me give you a little quiz. Tell me if you can fill in the blanks to these bits of proverbial wisdom that we have all heard all our lives. If something is worth doing, it's worth doing well, right? Don't do something unwell. Don't do something poorly. How about this next one? I'll just show you the slide. What goes in there? Winners never. Yes. And who never wins? Yeah, quitters, losers. I heard both out there. Yeah. How about this one? This one is a famous quote, but it's worked its way into the cultural psyche. Failure is not an option. You cannot fail. You better not fail. Lives are at stake. This is a newish one, and so maybe it's just millennials or below, or maybe it's even below that. But what goes in here? Rise, and some of your boomers are like, shine. No. It's not shine anymore. You're too old. It's rise and grind. Get stuff done. Be productive. Get up earlier than everybody else. I mean, we've got all kinds of these, right? Go big or go home. If you can't stand the heat, stay out of the kitchen. How many athletes give 110% because they're not good at math, right? Hustle is always greater than talent. If something is worth doing, it's worth doing well. Winners never quit, quitters never win. The early bird gets the worm. All these things are good in a lot of ways. I think this mentality is how Americans got to the moon, if you believe that we got to the moon. I know some people don't. But this mentality got things done. It built the interstate highway system. It created the Dewey Decimal System. There's a lot of good things that were at the result of this, like, let's get it done. Let's put our minds together. Let's figure this out. Let's make it happen. It gave us the movie Rudy, right? He's a walk-on at Notre Dame, and look at this guy, he's carried off on the shoulders of his teammates. The problem is with this mentality, as good as it is, there is a cost to it. There is a cost to it. There is a popular nonfiction author who has written a series of books where he takes these cultural expectations and he says, okay, let's say we took all the advice that people are told to take, and what would happen? What would their lives actually be like if we just did it all? And he's done it in different areas, but one that I thought was pretty interesting was his book about the wellness culture. If you took all the advice from the wellness culture, and it's pretty fascinating. He was reading through everything. The book is called Drop Dead Healthy by A.J. Jacobs. You do everything that everybody recommends that you do. Everything. And so he was doing stuff like one nutritionist said, eat more turmeric, because that prevents cancer. And then another nutritionist, these are all like well-educated people, said, don't eat turmeric because it's got elevated levels of lead and it will kill you. There's even conflicting advice. But he said if you tried to take all the health advice, you would literally have zero time for anything else, including a job, including family. All you could do all day, every day was maintain your health. That's all you could do if you took all the advice. Imagine you tried to do it all. Imagine you tried to do every wellness recommendation, every parenting principle, every piece of financial advice, every marriage insight, every personal productivity tip. And we built this impossible agenda that we've imposed on our lives because we're listening to all these influencers on social media. Think about all the quote-unquote advice that is embedded in our culture right now. If you want to be a good human, it's simple. This is all you got to do. You got to take 10,000 steps every day. You got to be fully present at all times. Cook your meals from scratch. Intentionally maintain your friendships. Have friends. Be self-reliant. Say yes to more things, but have healthy boundaries. Exercise 4 to 5 times a week. Don't have body image issues. Drink 64 ounces of water every day. Save money for a rainy day. Be more generous. Grow your own vegetables. Oh, and again, have healthy boundaries. Limit screen time. Be well informed about current events and news. Maintain inbox 0. Read to your children every day. Read to yourself every day. Make sure your kids have every opportunity possible. Send handwritten cards. Work on a self-improvement project every day. Make time for yourself. Make time for your spouse. Make time for your kids. Maximize your productivity. Stop and smell the roses. Keep a diary or a journal. Volunteer weekly. Get 8 hours of sleep every night. And if you don't do all these things, you are a failure. This is the culture that you live in. It is a high-pressure culture. Now, some of you are like, well, yeah, I do a couple of those things, but if that's the standard, I'm really in trouble. I'm really in trouble. And no joke, this is what some of you try to do. You bounce from one thing to another, to another, to another, because you realize, well, I can't do that, so maybe I'll try to do this. And you know what ends up happening? You feel guilty about all of it. I'm not doing any of it good. I'm a failure. And you walk around life probably as a very capable parent, a very capable spouse, relatively healthy, and feel like you're just failing at life. Because we have ingested all these cultural standards of what it means to be a good human. The rise and grind mentality, it can be dangerous because you are guaranteed to fail if this is your standard. You're guaranteed to fail. Evidently, failure is an option. But worse, I think when we live by these kinds of expectations, self-imposed or otherwise, maybe they're imposed by our loved ones and our family members on us, authority figures in our lives. When we live by those, this inevitably turns into hopelessness. And I think we eventually let go of all of it, even the stuff that we can do. Here's the spiritual cognitive distortion. I could never do that. I could never do that. I actually came up with some slogans. These are going to be much less popular. I had AI help me turn them into stickers, but here's my submissions for some slogans that maybe would be healthier for us. Good enough is sometimes good enough. You know, the Joneses, you don't have to keep up with them. Some people are not worth keeping up with. You can do lots of things, but not all the things. Rest can be productive too. Sometimes done is better than perfect. And quitting is an option. It is. So here we arrive at a dilemma, because some of you heard everything I just said, and you're like, oh, that's bad news, because you're going to play into people's weaknesses, and they're not going to get done the things that they should get done. And some of you are like, well, it's a relief to actually hear somebody articulate that all the expectations that our culture places on us are not always healthy. So those two reactions are probably in the room right now. The truth is, here's the dilemma. The truth is, God regularly asks people to do things they can't do. What do we do with that? God asks people to do things they can't do all the time. It happens, in fact, it happens so often, you start to suspect that God's doing it on purpose. Think about all the stories in the Bible. You name a character in the Bible, and they did not want to do and thought they could not do the thing God had asked them to do. Abraham, can't have kids, God. God's like, I want you to be the father of many nations. And Abraham's like, I can't even have one. No worries, I'll handle it. God, we're on a time clock here. I'm getting older. I mean, he was old when God told him that. God worked it out. Moses, God, I cannot public speak and I cannot lead. And God's like, I need you to public speak and lead. What are you doing, God? Paul said, you know what? I hate Jesus and I hate Gentiles and I want to murder Christians. Jesus was like, you are going to be a missionary to the Gentiles and make them Christian. God, what are you doing? You hear all that? When I hear stuff like that, I'm like, God, I don't want to have to live in Hawaii near the beach. I could not do it. Would it work? Does reverse psychology work on God? He's going to move me to Kansas or something. You notice that God never, ever, ever asks people to do things that are convenient? Like I do all the time. Like if I'm going to make a request from somebody, I want it to be super convenient. Oh, it's like 2 minutes out of your way, tops. It'll take like 5 seconds. It's really nothing. I try to minimize the commitment. God's never like that. God's never like, oh, it's just a couple minutes out of your way. It's just this little thing, no big deal. It's always like this major life-altering scenario. In the book of Hebrews, which is recapping a story from all the way back in the book of Genesis, Hebrews chapter 11, verse 8, the author writes this, by faith, Abraham, when he was called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, God's like, I'm going to give you some land for all those babies that you don't have yet. Abraham obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. Verse 9, by faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, his children and grandchildren, who were heirs with him of the same promise. So just think about this. If you don't know the story of Abraham, it's fine. Abraham is just living his life in a little town called Ur, spelled U-R. He's just living life. Bible doesn't give us a lot of background on what he was doing, but it just seems like he's settled in. I mean, he's a little older. He's probably past retirement age, and he's just doing his thing. And God says, Abraham, I need you to move. Okay, down the street, across town. And God says, I'll tell you when you get there. I just need you to pack up and start driving. Where are we going? I'm not telling you yet. That would not fly with my family. I can't get them to exit the house unless they have a detailed itinerary and agenda. Where are we going? When are we coming back? How long are we going to be there? And will there be any hiking? Because if so, I'm out. My wife, I think I might have traumatized her. Every time I say, hey, you want to go with me to get coffee? You want to go with me to the store? She's like, should I bring my hiking shoes? Asks me that all the time. I took her hiking one time. How many of you, if God said, hey, I need you to move across the continent, I won't tell you where you're going until we get there, you'd be like, I'm out. I could never do that. I could never do that. Couldn't do that, God. Sorry. Not for me. I told you Abraham was kind of past retirement age. And did you notice what kind of house did God give him for the rest of his life? Imagine if God was like, I need you not only to move, I'm not going to tell you where, and you're going to live in a tent the rest of your life. How many would be like, I cannot do that? I don't even like living in a tent for a night. I haven't gone tent camping on purpose in a long time. I haven't done it accidentally either, by the way, but I haven't done it in a long time. It's not like some of you are like, tent camping's the best. We invented houses so we wouldn't have to tent camp. It's not something that doesn't sound like fun. I don't like not getting sleep. Some of you love that kind of thing, but it's great. But God was like, hey, you're going to tent camp for the rest of your life. And Abraham was settled. You know that feeling? Have you ever, gotten the bag of chips out, made the popcorn, and you're on the couch? You're not sitting on the couch, but you're in the couch. You're like rested. Your body is fully relaxed. And then like the doorbell rings. I can't get it. I'm settled. Or how about if your spouse says, honey, I need you to, and you pretend you can't hear them? Then you turn off your phone so they can't text you. You're settled. Abraham was settled in. And this is why the Bible constantly holds Abraham up as a model of faith throughout Scripture. He's a model of faith because he was like, okay, God, let's do this. I'm in. Let's do this. I can do this. But the thing is, it's not just moving across the continent. A lot of the stuff that God's going to ask us to do, sometimes God does ask you to move, and I hope nobody else. Please stick around for a while. But the things that we wrestle with are the day-to-day behaviors, the day-to-day expectations, the day-to-day values and virtues that we have to think about, that we should think about. I want to show you a couple of passages in the book of Colossians, starting in chapter 3, verse 5, where Paul writes this in a letter to some people. He says, put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature. So put to death all this stuff. And that's his way of saying, look, you've got these inclinations in you. You have to kill them. These are not healthy. They don't make you better. They don't make your relationships better. They don't make your life better or anybody else's life better. You need to kill sexual immorality. You need to kill impurity and lust and evil desires and greed, which is idolatry. Because of those things, the wrath of God is coming. And he says, you used to walk in these ways back in the day in the life you once lived, but now you must also rid yourself of all these things. You got to rid yourself of anger and rage, which are apparently different. Malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Do not lie to each other. And then he says, not only is it all that stuff that you shouldn't do anymore, but now you got to put on some stuff. He says, rather clothe yourselves with things like compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness and patience. Bear with one another, forgive one another. And over all those things, put on love, which makes them all work together. It binds them all in perfect unity. He writes later in the passage, also be at peace with everyone. So if you want to be a successful Christian, you read passages like this and you kind of hear this overwhelming language. Okay, no sexual immorality, absolutely no impurity, zero lust, no evil desire, stop the greed, cut the anger, no rage, no malice, no slander, no filthy language, no lying, more compassion, more kindness, more humility. Always be gentle, exercise patience, intentionally bearing with each other, endless forgiveness, and most of all, love. And don't ever mess up. How many of you look at that list and I broke half of those this morning before church. I could never do that. It feels overwhelming. And so sometimes we hear the message of faith, the message of Christianity as this burden, as this expectation that we can't meet. That sounds just like the messaging of culture. You can never be a good enough Christian because you can't do these things and everybody else has probably got them figured out, but not you. You might be thinking about that guy who said, man, Christians can't keep all the rules. How do they expect me to? It feels like that. So how should we think about this? How should we think about this? God does absolutely ask us to do hard things. He does. He asks you to do hard things. Things that maybe you have let go because you said, I couldn't. I can't live that way. I can't make those choices. I can't be that person. And he does. He asks us to do really difficult things. But he also recognizes, or we should also recognize, that it's easy for humans to lose hope under the weight of what feel like impossible standards. So when we read passages like what we've read, when we read about the expectations of being a faithful Christian, and we're like, there's no way, I could never do that. How do we reconcile these two ideas? That God does have high expectations for you. That it's probably easy for you to do a little analysis of the mental moral system, your choices, and think, yeah, there's some areas that I'm falling short in. But I don't know if I could do it. There's probably some sin that you have in your life that you're wrestling with right now, and you know you don't want to be wrestling with that sin. You know you don't want to be doing that. You know you don't want that going on in your life, but you don't know how to stop it. You're not sure how to live without it. You're not sure what to do. You're not sure how to get over it. How do we get over these things and live these impossible expectations? And I think a lot of people just kind of, well, I could never do that. I'll continue going to church. I'll continue claiming Christianity, but I just don't, it's not going to have the impact. I'm going to settle and figure out what I can do and what I can't, and just I'll work it out that way. What do we do? How do we work out this? There's so many things that we could say about this particular distortion of the I can't distortion. Because if you were raised in a certain era, you probably look at the younger generations and you're like, these people are weak. They don't try hard enough. They don't have that oomph, that gumption. What are the old school word? That moxie. This generation doesn't have moxie, and they can't get it figured out. But you know what the generation before you said about you? Same thing. Same thing. These kids think they need electricity, indoor plumbing. They don't have what it takes. Every generation has always said that about the next generation, because there's different things that they're dealing with. And the things that maybe came easy to you don't come easy to the next generation. But sometimes the things that come easy to the next generation don't come easy to you. Like programming VCRs and understanding technology, things like that, right? There's always going to be something like that. There's so many things that we could say about this distortion of I simply can't do it, I could never. But I just want to offer three perspectives as we wrap up. Number one, to acknowledge this, that the Bible does communicate high expectations for you. There are high expectations that God has, that Jesus says, I want you to be like me. But it also includes endless resources, high expectations and endless resources, and of course, grace. Because this is the hard thing, and I don't know why churches, maybe it's just a human feature of the way that we think. We really wrestle with that tension and that balance. We can live with high expectations. We can live in a culture that says measure up, do better, but we seem to struggle living with that and exercising grace, especially grace for ourselves. But God communicates this very clearly throughout Scripture. We talked about this last week. God's not disappointed in you. For some people, that's hard to hear. How could he not be disappointed in me because I'm such a failure? Well, he's not disappointed in you because he knows everything. He already knew that you were going to fall short. That's the whole endeavor. That's the whole point of the gospel, is that he knew you were going to fall short. He's not angry like you get angry. But one of the things that I think is fascinating to consider is that the language of human transformation, when you read a self-help book and when you read or watch a self-help YouTube or TikTok video, it's all about you doing more, you trying harder, you digging in, you figuring it out. The language of Scripture is all about God doing these things in you and through you through the power of the Holy Spirit. It's a passive transformation. It's fascinating that we allow ourselves to be transformed and we stop resisting transformation. But I want you to note the Colossians passage that I just read that had all these high expectations. I didn't read it from the beginning. I didn't give you the whole context. The problem, if you read the Bible in context, it ruins the spiritual distortions. But if you actually read what Paul wrote to these people that he gave these high expectations to, he starts by saying this in verse 1 of chapter 3. He says, "Since then you have been raised with Christ." Meaning, just as Christ was raised from the dead, you spiritually have been raised from the dead. This is a done deal. You're in, you're good, you've made the team, you're set. Since you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on these earthly things. The high achievement culture, the things that you think that you got to measure up to, the standards that you impose on yourself that nobody else is expecting. He writes, "For you died." This person that you consider that person that was always trying to measure up and falling short, that person's gone. You died, and your life is now preserved and protected and hidden with Christ in God. And when Christ, who is your life, appears, you're going to appear with him in glory. You made it. You're good. You're in. You're set. You're done. It's finished. That's what he says. And then he says, since it's finished, let's go ahead and get some of these other details worked out about your personal life. But it is not to measure up. It's because you have already measured up. I think this is the difference in our culture when we think, and again, I think it might be North American culture. It's all about achievement, and we have a hard time hearing Paul's words that way because we think what we do defines who we are. In fact, in a lot of conversations that you have, if somebody asks what you do, you have to be very careful because you understand that they're really asking, who are you? Who are you? But Paul says who you are defines what you do. The behaviors, the choices, the thoughts, the language. Paul's entire point is that you are not an utter failure. Secondly, the message is never only one or the other. It's never one-sided. It's never just one thing. The never is like, you're a dummy, you're an idiot, you're a failure. It's never that. It's always, hey, you can do better, but there's grace. There's truth, and there is love. And it's all over Scripture. We, depending on our feelings at the time, we think of one or the other. The Bible talks a lot about rest and relaxation and peace. In fact, a lot of the Bible, though, maybe some of your favorite Bible verse is the combination of both, where Jesus in Matthew chapter 11, verse 29, I don't have it on the screen, but he says, it's like a message, just come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden. Come to me. I will give you rest. Doesn't that sound good? And then he goes on to say, he goes, my burdens are easy, my yoke is light. Not that there's no expectations and not that it doesn't matter what we do, but that God has created a way of being human for us that is life-giving and flourishing and allows us to be the best version of ourselves through the help of the Spirit. If you ever just hear one thing in a church, it's probably confirmation bias, or they're not presenting to you the whole gospel. Number 3, the third perspective I think we need to have in this distortion of I could never do all that is just some honesty. Some personal honesty. Where are you selling yourself short? Maybe you could do that thing you think you could never do. Maybe you could get rid of that sin that you think that is going to be with you the rest of your life. Maybe that sin, that anger, that impatience, that frustration that you express all the time isn't actually a personality trait. Maybe it is a sin, and maybe you need to stop excusing it. Maybe that lust that you struggle with is something that you could deal with through the help of the Spirit. Where are you selling yourself short? Maybe you're selling yourself short. But at the same time, we have to be willing to ask ourselves this question. Where are you living in unnecessary guilt? God might be calling you to dig deeper. He might be. That might be what you need. And I think that's what a lot of people need. In fact, I think a lot of us need both of this, don't we? There's some areas of our lives where we need to dig deep and do what God has asked us to do. And there's some areas of our lives that we need to just let go of some expectation that God has never asked us to carry. Sometimes it's both. If you're just hearing one or the other, you're probably not hearing the full message. You might be selling yourself short. You might be living in unnecessary guilt. At the end of Hebrews chapter 11, we were reading there about Abraham. The author goes off to list all these spiritual giants, all these people that had done these amazing things for God. And sometimes you read the Bible and you're like, well, look at all those people were amazing. They did all amazing things. And I already told you that every single person was like, I could not do that. And God's like, you're going to do it. I'm going to make it happen. But as you read through that list, he just keeps going. By faith, this person. By faith, that person. By faith, the other person. And then he gets to the end, and then it's like he's telling you this historical truth about all these incredible figures that have lived throughout history and done what God has asked them to do. And then it's like he turns and looks at us in the eye, and he's like, all those people who live by faith are cheering you on. That there's this great cloud of witnesses who have said, yes, it is hard, but it is worth it. We can do it. We can live the way that God has asked us to live. We can do it. And they're cheering you on as if you're a runner in an arena just about to finish the race. And you've got thousands, millions of people looking at you saying, I didn't think I could do it either, but I can do it. You can keep it up. You can finish the race. You can finish strong. That's how the chapter Hebrews chapter 11 ends and chapter 12 begins. It's beautiful because you're reminded that you're part of this endless sea of people who have gone before you and done difficult things, lived difficult lives, but managed to make it through, and they're cheering you on. It's a beautiful image. I'm going to ask our praise team to come up on stage, and we're going to sing a song in closing. Go ahead and stand if you would. If nothing else, what I hope people hear is twofold, that there are some things you probably need to take care of and do and fix and change and quit and ask forgiveness for, and there are some things. But there are some burdens that you're probably carrying that you never needed to, that God's not asking you to. That there is grace for you as well.